As the flame goes out in Paris and you hear that all too familiar sound of a school bus making the rounds in your neighborhood, August is here and they are also turning the lights back on in WNBA arenas across the country. Can the new faces and the youth in Indiana get the fever to the playoffs this year? Stay tuned and find out as we dive in today right here on Locked On Women's Basketball.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, friends. It is August 12th, 2024, and happy Monday. School is starting all over the country. So from the first years to in kindergarten, all the way up to the college kids who are hauling in couches and 24 packs into their apartments. We hope everybody has an awesome first day of school. I am Missy Heidrick, national correspondent at The Next. Thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA, all uppercase, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Well, the past 2 weeks of amazing performances at the Olympics in Paris help us renew our faith in humanity, or so I hope. We see athletes competing at the height of their sport, the best at their craft, and they get the spotlight that they absolutely deserve. College sports will be back on our radars in just a few weeks, but the lights are back on in WNBA arenas across the country, and we are here for it. It is the march to the playoffs. And today we are going to take a look at the young Indiana Fever team, blessed with talent across the board and fighting to get in the playoffs in 2024. What was this team like before the extended break? How can this break help and reset the Fever, and what lies ahead? And what do they need to do to make this playoff appearance happen? Here to help me dissect it all is the one person who knows everything about all things professional basketball in the state of Indiana, and I can attest he has actually gotten a vacation in the month of July and into August. Thank you, Lord. Tony East is here. Good morning, Tony. Let's start. I know I think we would be remiss if we didn't take a little reflection time and talk about gold medals that were won in Paris by both the men's and the women's team. Let's start on the men's side because it was such an interesting march, I think, of this group to watch them come together, become cohesive, and then finally get over that hump. We've all familiar with the Dream Team, and back then the Dream, it just doesn't look like that anymore. But this USA basketball squad that they put together, they had enough grit and they had enough talent, and they did exactly what they had to do to get that gold medal.
For sure. I think a theme on both sides, men's and women's, was like the world kind of like slowly closing the gap on the United States. I think that will be the case for a long time. But, you know, people said on the men's side, this was the best collection of talent they've had since the NBA said, yeah, go ahead, play in the Olympics back in 1992. I think 2012 should speak for that. But either way, it was a very good team, and should have been foretelling for the France USA women's final that they got pushed several times in their exhibitions, and then in the semifinals where they were down 17, and then the finals where they could not create any separation. Like, it takes that level of team with legends playing at their absolute apex all at the same time to win some of these games. And like, it was probably a seminal moment for people in my generation to watch the three stars of our life in the NBA go crazy like that. But the women's was the same way in the championship game, just in a much less pretty game, let's say.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I'm with you. I mean, I've been a Steph Curry fan since his Davidson days, and to see what he's done as a professional with the Warriors, but then his first real foray. I mean, this was his first Olympic team. And I think when you listen to him talk about it, how important it was for him, just as we have talked about some of the legends of the women's side, I think Steph Curry stepping into that one time, getting the gold medal and being like, you know what, I can check that box, because this is a guy, you are absolutely right, legend beyond legend.
Yeah, it you know, like when I used to have I'd set alarms to watch the Warriors in college, right? Like I love that. And
Yes.
it's crazy to me too. Like, obviously it's a big deal and he doesn't think this way, but you're right that it feels like it's a checkbox of his life. Like it's like the peak, the apex of someone else's like athletic career. He's like, great. All right, next. What's next?
I know. You're absolutely right. Well, then what next on the women's side was to complete what needed to become and has been this dynasty. They were going for the 8th straight gold medal. We have watched them blow people out by massive, massive amounts. But yet I think what everybody got in that gold medal game yesterday, which was very telling, and I think it was a fantastic exclamation point on a wonderful Olympic Games in the country of France, and in Paris, to have France push the United States all the way to literally the last bucket scored in that game. Your reactions, because it's such an interesting conversation. We've all been having it, but it seems as though we may have watched this pendulum swing when it comes to USA women's basketball as they move forward now, thinking what happens down the road.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. They're still the best team, right?
Yeah,
like,
100%.
But
yeah,
I mean, Gabby Williams was a sneeze away from an overtime gold medal. Like, it was so... what a crazy, like, I can't believe she got that shot in the air. Like, she was running from, that was unbelievable. But that game kind of showed something interesting about this USA team to me. Kind of throughout the tournament, they weren't that great at getting up threes, or like a lot of them, and they were so good inside that it did not matter at all, right?
Yeah.
So they were just steamrolling everybody. In this game, France did a wonderful job walling up inside, and they only took 12 threes, Team USA did. And so 33.9% from the field. They smoked, how many layups? A trillion, a billion, something in that range. And so they got a bunch of free throws up because they were getting fouled and living in the lane with physicality. But there's only so much you can do, and the math problem skews that poorly. Like, France got 36 threes in that game. So the talent was overwhelming. It will be for a while, right? That they're going to be the favorites for every gold for a long time. But they, like, the men's side kind of had this theme too. It's like you need the right balance of these stars that are amazing and have built their, like, I'm one of the best American player brands, with like role players who will do shooting and defense and like yucky, boring, but very important stuff for these teams.
Yeah.
That's not to say these players can't. They can. They're stars. They're very good at a lot of things. They're star players. It's just not what they're used to, or like natural for them in a way that makes it click as fast. So they were still so good. They obviously won the game still, but they shot under 34% and made 2 threes in the whole game. It was very sloppy, and I think that's a big credit to France. They played a very good defensive game.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And I would say, I think this is apropos for both the men's and the women's side. We have to remember that when you go into these international competitions and on the world stage like this, these are professionals that are coming from other countries as well. We see some of them in the NBA and the WNBA. We remember some of these names from college, but they are also pros, and they are very good at what they do. And some of these teams spend all year together. They don't have hodgepodge, couple weeks of training camp, and then they throw them out to the wolves and say, hey, go win a medal. It's different for USA basketball, always has been. The system is set up very differently. But I think now, and this is the conversation, I mean, I did it 2 weeks ago, I talked about this. We have to start thinking about this next evolution of where we go with rosters and the talent. Because what I don't want to have happen, I think maybe USA men's basketball has managed it a little bit better. I don't want to have happen is we miss the window. We miss the window with some of this younger talent on the women's side, and that they are not part of what continues this dynasty. That's my biggest concern. And I hope that there are people now, and we're going to talk about one of those players in a little bit, but there's more than just Caitlyn Clark. There are others. And this has to start to be the turnover and the rollover of these rosters. We got to come to grips with it, folks. This needs to happen.
I would like to truth serum everyone who decides on the rosters, men's and women's, because like on the men's side, you know, one of them was here locally, so there's a lot to talk about it. Like Tyrese Halliburton and Anthony Edwards are on that team, right? And Tyrese barely played, and he had played. He was very good, but they're 22 and 24, and so they also played in the World Cup last year. There was chatter like, look at this, the next like era. Okay, 2028, put these two on, put a couple of these older, you know, like you're building the team with the younger pipeline. And a lot of this Team USA team will still be there. I think that on the women's side in 28 also, but not I think the youngest player was 26, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a little different. They'll be fine again.
Yeah.
But you're right. I think there is like a program building part of it too, or even just experience for them in some way, whoever it may be. And they had different younger players, and Leah Boston was in their camps and all that stuff too, right? But it's just different when it's the full experience of the Olympics, the World Cup, whatever it may be. But they'll never admit they'll never publicly say exactly how they put that like into their consideration, and they shouldn't.
No, I agree with you. And I just think we've seen, there was a lot of questions. I'm not overly versed in the world of soccer, professional soccer, but I will say, give credit. I think how they have done with USA women's soccer, that they said, you know what, we've got to go. We got to go with younger legs, younger talent. We've got to refresh this. And a lot of those people had retired, those women that we associate with USA soccer and gold medals and World Cups, they had retired. That's part of it. But it's also a time where sometimes people just aren't on the roster, and that's okay. And we've got to think forward and think down the road. And I think that's where USA women's basketball especially is going to have to grasp this. They got to start to make some decisions.
And can we make it a public thing that it's not insulting to not be on Team USA?
Yeah.
Like it's okay to be the 15th best American basketball player. That's
You're absolutely right.
That's really cool.
100%. And you know what? When you're the 13th guy or gal on the bench, that's not also a bad thing. I mean, that's pretty cool.
The doctor with the worst grades in med school is still a doctor, right? You're still a gold medalist.
Amen. All right. Well, when we come back, Tony and we got to talk about this Fever team, what the break has been about, where they've been, where they were up to this point. And has the break been exactly what the doctor ordered, no matter where he finished in school? Well, passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride to die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guarantee Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guarantee Fit only available to U.S. customers. And also a message from our friends at Magic Spoon, who are great supporters of ours here at Locked On Women's Basketball. Well, we're back to school, so everybody's got to have breakfast. And I don't know about you, but growing up, cereal was a really big part of that. Well, Magic Spoon has amazing flavors you will love. High protein and less sugar. There's a variety pack now, 4 flavors: cocoa, fruity, frosted, and peanut butter. This pack has 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, and 4 to 5 grams of net carbs, only 140 calories per serving. It's high protein, has 0 grams of sugar, keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, and soy-free. Huge favorites in my house. The cocoa and frosted, we've got empty boxes all around. So go to magicspoon.com/lockedon to grab a variety pack and try it today. And be sure to use our promo code LOCKEDON at checkout to save $5 off your order. Remember, start your day off right with a delicious bowl of high protein cereal at magicspoon.com/lockedon and use the code LOCKEDON to save $5 off. Hi, everybody. Missy Heidrick, and thank you for joining us here on Locked On Women's Basketball. Thank you for making it your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NBA podcast. There is no off season in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed and entertained as Locked On NBA. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Tony East is here with me, and we are talking about all things now with the Indiana Fever. All right, Tony, I went and looked at the numbers. Before this team went on break back in July, they were sitting at 11-15. 7th overall in the league, 3rd in the Eastern Conference, 3.5 games ahead of 8th place, which is the Chicago Sky. Let's just talk a little bit about maybe that month of July. 3-3, they went 5-5 over their last 10 games. As you looked at this team as they were headed towards this extended break because of the Olympics, etc., what was your take? What did you see? And was this break coming at a good time?
That's the hardest question to answer. Is this a good time? Because I had to write about this. It was so confusing. It was so head scratching to watch them play in July because they finally got, we talked about this on the show, right? They got a signature win finally, right? They went on the road at the very end of June. They beat Phoenix. It was the best team they'd beaten to that point. And I thought, okay, maybe this is a turning point, right? They got some wins against the bad teams before. They beat a good team. And then a week later, they beat New York. Whoa. Yeah. That's even more of a signature win. Wow, this team's playing really good. And then right after that, they beat Phoenix again. And then they beat Minnesota. Holy cow. Maybe this favorite team's like pretty good and a tough out. And in between those games that I just described, they lost at home to Washington. And then they went into Dallas to give up 101 points to the worst team in the league. And it's like, what? What just happened? Like, how is that a stretch of results that happened? So it's really hard for me to kind of grip what this team is. They'll be happy, and they should be, that they have a little bit of cushion ahead of 9, right? So like they can't coast. The Dream are good, but they have, if they play 500 ball the rest of the season, they're probably gonna make the playoffs. That's great. But if they had just cleaned up against 2 teams they should have beat, they'd have a ton of cushion heading into this final stretch of the season. So on one end, I think they can smile and say, yep, we're really clicking on offense, probably in the top half of the league offensively. That's great. On the other hand, they can say, hey, our defensive progress isn't really happening. If the Dallas Wings didn't have like the most injury-riddled season ever, we'd be the worst defensive team in the league.
Yeah.
So I kind of am curious on your perspective as a former player, like how this wide of a consistency gap can exist, because I get that you can have like a hot night and beat New York, but to also beat Minnesota and Phoenix twice in that stretch suggests that there's something is there. Like they're playing well, but then they lost to 2 of the worst teams in the league within the same week. It's very strange because they clearly have something there. They just can't summon it all the time.
Well, the one that I circled is the one you mentioned, which is you go all the way back. It's the game before, right before they go on break, and they played. I mean, it's going to be almost a month before they're going to play, and they give up 101, and they lose at Dallas. Now they have been 5-10 on the road in the first half of this season, 6-5 at home. So the road has been a struggle. There's no doubt. You give up 101. Yet you score 93. Most people are going to feel pretty darn good about the 93. It's the 101 that's a problem. Seems to me that it's kind of the old adage when things are going great and we're clicking offensively, then the defense dials in. If things aren't going as well on the offensive end, then you lose that focus. And I think that's maybe, to me, where I have seen this, it's kind of this, you feel like the pendulum swings really far one way and then the other. And that would be my question probably to Christy Sides, is how do you get this team to be able to be focused no matter what, knowing you got to get people shut down? It just seems the lapses may be more on the defensive side, obviously, than the offensive side.
And people talk about when the best defensive teams like defense travels, for lack of better terms, maybe that bleeds into their road record, because I brought this up with you last time, and the stat is still almost perfect. There's one blemish, unfortunately. They are 0-14 when they give up over 86 points and 11-1 in every other game, right? Yeah. That 86 isn't even like that good.
No.
but if that bar is all you have to clear, like you can win. You can win games doing that. So it's just it's so obvious when you break it down like that. Like just get some stops. Get 3 more stops every game. That sounds so easy, and it's not, right? If every team could get 3 more stops every game, they would do it. But that's the line between them being like this consistently, 17-13 right now kind of team and where they are. And so to answer the actual question you proposed to me, I think they feel good entering the break because the highs were so high, right? Yeah. Like that makes you feel like, okay, if we really lock in and focus in this off time, they only have 1 player away from the Olympics. They have 11 players together, and Christy Wallace was out of the rotation right before the break. So their whole rotation can click and practice and get chemistry. That's great. Like they have to feel like, yes, this is great. But at the same time, it's like, how do you focus during the break on we need those to happen more often, as opposed to we need those other games to happen less often. I think that's kind of what they're figuring out. But I do think it was a not awesome time to break, because they had such like oh sweet, we're kind of clicking right now kind of deal, even though they can focus on all that at the same time.
Well, no, and I think the other part of it, and this might be, it's the one word a lot of folks don't want to use these days, but we have to talk about accountability. So, I mean, we've got the people that are on the floor. If you can't get those stops when necessary, if we can't string 2 to 3 together, if we can't get stops at the end of quarters, if we can't get execution when we need it on a under 10-second shot clock, out of bounds underneath defensive stand, then maybe those aren't the right people in the lineup. And that to me sometimes is where it's the double-edged sword. Do I take this offense out if it's not necessarily performing defensively? And where's that going to be, where's going to be the happy medium? Those are some of the questions I think they're going to have to answer early here in August, because anything past that cushion, it can get real thin.
Yeah, and it doesn't, this isn't like insulting, but it does say something that in crunch time, they do a lot of offense defense subbing, right? So to me, part of that accountability and figuring stuff out is like, what is their best blend? Because their best offensive players are not their best defensive players and vice versa. So that's kind of why they have struggled sometimes too. And putting that all together, I think, has been a challenge for a young team that has some players who kind of specialize or are better on one end or the other. And that can be a part of this too. It's like, come out of the break, and this lineup is our 5. They're going to stay out there no matter what. Guard someone. Someone. Get us out. But that it's not easy to say that and do that. But that I think that's part of it too. And that's kind of a tricky balance for a coach, because I don't know how I would do it as a coach, but like if you have to make those kind of subs to make your lineups hum, it's hard, because you have to take someone out to do that, and it's just tricky.
Yeah, and matchups are in very much an indicator of where they go with how they want to use those lineups as well. All right, when we come back, the road ahead and what the Fever are going to have to do to be playoff contenders. Well, I live in Kansas City, and one of the hottest tickets in town outside of getting yourself to Chiefs training camp is to see the much improved Kansas City Royals. GameTime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the GameTime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets, the only ticket app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You get to see the view from your seat on your phone before you buy it. All-in pricing shows you the total cost up front, which you don't get necessarily in other places. And you can buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. So many ways to save money on tickets, no matter when you buy. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with GameTime. And if you come to Kansas City, you can go see Bobby Witt Jr. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Hi, everybody. Missy Heidrick. Thank you for joining us on Locked On Women's Basketball. I'm here with Tony East. He's a man in the thick of it and all things Indiana pro basketball, including the Indiana Fever, who get back on the proverbial horse when they have a game coming up at the end of this week, Friday, August 16th. Let's talk a little bit about where this group is headed, Tony, what happens, what you see. And obviously this starts at the very top with young faces, and it's some with great experience, others who are just learning every single day in this league what it means to grind it out.
Playoffs. I can't believe I'm saying that. 2016. That's so long ago.
Yes.
This is the last time.
That is.
Time we played a playoff game.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Caitlyn Clark was 11? No, 13. 13. There we go.
That's kind of sick. That's kind of scary. Still leading this team right now, coming in out of this break. She's averaging 17.1. She leads this team in assists, 8.2 per game. She's been number 1 on this team in steals, almost a steal and a half. Aaliyah Boston, she's in there. She's averaging a little over 14. You've got Kelsey Mitchell, close to 17 points a game as well. Really, you've got 4 players, their top 4, all averaging double figures. There's a bit of a drop off after that. So we've talked about scoring. We've talked about that accountability and defense. What are you looking for when this team comes back out of the gate, when they get back into that game mode?
I want to see if they can get to that high right away because they come out pretty tough schedule-wise from this break. If Phoenix first, which they like when I mentioned that they have their whole team, the Aces are everybody's going to be like, oh, they have so many Olympians. But like Phoenix has 2, right? Like just on Team USA, I don't know about the rest off the top of my head, but like so that and it's 2 very prominent players. So their break is different than the Fever's break in terms of how they can practice, what they can do, stuff like that, right? So can they beat Phoenix for the 3rd time? And then they play Seattle, who's given them trouble. Like teams with a really good post and size have given them trouble. And then they play Minnesota, who's very good. And like, can you win any of those? Can you show like, hey, you just beat these good teams right before the break? Can you come right back out and hit that level again? Because like I said, and like we talked about, when you're inconsistent like that, you just never know what a gap's going to do. And their schedule was so hard to start the season. I can give them grace there. Context matters a lot for these young teams. So they play Atlanta that 4th game, and Atlanta's going to be their team they're circling the most just because of the standings. So giving themselves cushion and looking good right away is extremely important because it's 3 tough teams. And then Atlanta, and then they get a break with, oh, wait, no, they don't. They play the Connecticut Sun. So they don't have, like, time to come out and be like, oh, we had a time off, shoot. Like, we're not humming right away. No, you can't. You can't do that. You'll lose 4 out of 5, and then all of a sudden the 8th seed is scary and precarious again. So they've got to come out and look really good right away, whether that's any of the things we've talked about, that offensive group all humming. That their very best stretch this season, I wrote about that, was when Melissa Smith, Kelsey Mitchell, Aaliyah Boston, and Caitlyn Clark all are playing well at the same time. And that's kind of hard for them all to add to each other, at least right now. I don't know if it will be forever. But when that happens, they look really good. Or can they actually guard a little bit like they did against Minnesota or New York? Or are they going to be clunky at first? Because that might this first 5 games coming out of this stretch, really their stretch from now until the end of August, because they play the Sky, who are also right with them in the standings to end the month. How do they hold up in those games? 3-3 or better. I think they'll go, sweet, we're going to be playing in the postseason, big time. That's awesome. If they wobble a little bit, they might have to go, oh man, we gotta look at the scoreboard every night and see how the Dream in the Sky did. Dang it. Like it just gets distracting really fast. So it's intangible, but coming out focused and looking good right away is going to matter a lot.
Well, and there's something to be said for being, you kind of control your own destiny at this point, right? So as you said, if you take care of your own business, the rest of it really is not as much of an impact on how you operate on a day-to-day. But pressure comes in all forms and fashion, and people are going to apply that. There are other teams that are trying to figure out a way to position themselves better. When you look at the overall standings, if I can move myself up, get a better seed, it's a kind of a log jam there in the middle when you've got the Phoenix one ahead of them, then Indiana, Chicago behind them, but you got Vegas, Seattle, they're all kind of in Minnesota, all in that same universe. Everyone's like, hey, we got to take care of our own business. Let me ask you this, in terms of this break, and there's been a ton of spotlight, pressure, all the things that have happened with Caitlyn Clark. How do you see, and have you heard in the conversations and the reporting that you've done in terms of, did this break come at a good time for her?
Oh, yeah. Yes. I don't know if Caitlyn Clark has breaks usually. Right. And especially when, as is the case for every rookie ever, like they go college and then the tournament, and they're like, oh my God, the draft is in 4 days. It's not that fast, but it's fast, right? And so like last year, 2 years ago with like Lexi Hall, like she's in training camp and she's still finishing class, like online, right? And then last year, Leah goes all the way to the championship. And they don't win, but whatever. It's a really long season. And she's right at the draft. And like midway through the season, she's like, yeah, I get why you guys are talking about me resting. I'm not going to do it, but like I've played back.
I'm tired. I'm tired.
So there's this gap for Caitlyn that's very lucky that it just happens to be an Olympic year, and people will be like, "Oh, she should have been on team." I don't care, but I don't want to talk about that. But it's good for her to have a gap. Like she went to Mexico, out of the All-Star quick, right? And then that's like refreshing, like a conversation. A big theme of talking to people these couple practices they've had during the break has been, do you feel like this has been more physically resetting or mentally? right? And it can be both, and it is both. But it's very interesting that the answer's been different for lots of players because it is both. It's very valuable to have that kind. It's very rare. It only happens once every 4 years for a reason. And so obviously it can affect the way you're playing because you have a lot of time off and players aren't used to that. But it is very refreshing, and that is nice. And Caitlyn, who went, and she never has time off because she's a global star, season to season with nothing in between and just craziness and chaos all the time. So, yeah, I think it was huge for her in that way to have that sort of thing happen. And I'll be very curious how she comes out now because she's so good at like serious on the court, goofy, fun teammate off. Like what does time off do for that kind of person, you know? So I'll be very fascinated to see what she's like. Cause of all the players, really any rookie, especially, but because her team made it so far in the tournament, like so valuable to finally have like a deep breath in your life.
No doubt. Let me ask you this. Has there been during this time now that they'll ramp up and head back into play, has there been a theme, a message that you've heard, even, you know, the read behind or read between the lines from the coaching staff about how they are going to approach this kind of getting back at it here and think about how important these early games in August are?
Yeah, we talked about it really, but defense, and I hate to just say that that's a theme. It's like, duh, you practice defense all the time. But, you know, I sometimes think when a team's really busy and like, we need to practice, you know, and they're not playing, well, we need to practice. I'm like, okay, you're pros. Like, you should be doing better than this still. But the Fever had that terrible stretch at the beginning of the season. We talked about it. We did a whole episode. And they said, we need to practice. And they had one practice chance at home. And Kirsty Side said, we worked on our shell. And the very next game, they had their best defensive game of the season. And I'm like, okay, you're not, you know, this isn't like lip service. Like practice helps, you know, it helps you ingrain these defensive things. And so that is what players and coaches, everyone, like defense and communication and all of these things that, like, even if you get beat, like just the general team connectivity on that end of the floor is kind of what they're hoping is better and more consistent coming out. And that has to be the answer. But they're spot on. And I don't think it's lip service, one, because of the example I just gave you, but two, because even before the break, they were like, yeah, we can't wait for the break to work on our defense. Right. So I think that this time to have a little training camp to rehash all that stuff has been good for them.
No, and I think that makes complete sense. And it's going to probably have to be. I mean, we've seen it time and time again. If there's been a message we've learned the last couple years, especially from Las Vegas, defense does win championships. Yeah. You know, a lot of people, you know, some people say that's lip service, but I think it's true. You know, I mean, yeah, I can outrun, I can outshoot you, but sometimes you just need a freaking stop. And that's what's got to happen. And so I think if the message has been kind of get back to basics, then I would assume most everybody whose eyeballs will be watching this Indiana team over the course of the next week and a half to 2 weeks after these first few games out of the gate is how does this team play defensively to help their offense as well?
Absolutely. And Vegas right now would say, hey, we're having our worst regular season in 3-4 years, and their defense it's still good, but it's fifth. It's not first, right? Like they take a small step back on that end, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, we are not in the open floor as much. Oh, we're not getting some easy shots. And Caitlyn Clark is wonderful in transition, and so stops help her be her. So the aces are a great example, and it all ties together. Sometimes your best defense can be offense, but they need the opposite to be the case.
You got that right. All right, my friend. Where's everybody going to find you once this season gets back in full tilt?
Yeah, we'll be hopefully this pretty soon, today, tomorrow, on the next about the Fever's break, Caitlyn's assist record game. They had a home run derby at a practice. They played some golf. They're doing all the fun team bonding stuff that they're able to do because they're all together while also doing all this practice stuff. And a little bit more about Erica Wheeler's all-star travel. Oof, that sucks. That sucks for Erica Wheeler. But very cool how Kelsey Mitchell might all come together. And then they're playing on Friday. I can't believe it. So lots of fun.
Back at it. Well, you will be able to find all things Fever from Tony at thenexthoops.com. Thank you, my friend. The playoffs are in your future. I think I can feel it. I just feel like this is it, man. I feel like for a guy that didn't really get a break because of the Pacers, I think this is just the destiny for the season. You're just going to ride it through.
I'm so used to riding like an August 28th story. Like, well, the Fever are out. How do they handle these last 6 games? No, not this year. They're trying all of them.
Nope, you're going to roll from one playoff into another training camp with nothing else in between. And I think that's
I also like the Olympic break. Thank you, Olympics.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us here today on Locked On Women's Basketball. You can find me at Missy Heidrick on X, formerly known as Twitter. Follow this podcast at Locked On WBB. And then, as I said, go see Tony and all of our amazing colleagues at thenexthoops.com. Thank you again for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen today. And now go check out the Locked On NBA podcast, where the season never ends, providing national expertise with a local perspective. You can find the link to Locked On NBA in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We hope your Olympic hangover goes away quickly. Enjoy a first few weeks back to school, everybody. Have a great day and come back to see us right here on Locked On Women's Basketball.